Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and today I want to review all the new footage of the upcoming new Star Trek seasons, and I'll start with the good and then go to the bad. I think Lower Decks is relatively good because I personally do find it funny. I enjoy all the parodies it makes of all the previous Star Trek shows. Obviously, you would only get it if you understand all the references and know what they're poking fun at, then it's kind of funny. For example, in this part, it's obviously making fun of that decon chamber they had in Enterprise, when they always went there after missions to planets to put all kinds of lotions all over their bodies, and they used it to kind of sexualize the crew. And it kind of made sense in a way because they were not yet using transporters, they were using shuttles. They always said in TNG and other shows that the transporter itself has a biofilter, that it cleans up your body after you return to the ship. It does it automatically, and so it makes sense that before the transporters you had to have some other way of doing that. So they had the decon chamber, and that's perfectly okay, but the way they used it in the early seasons of Enterprise was kind of ridiculous because they had whole scenes of nothing but the characters just putting lotions all over their almost naked bodies, and so it was obviously just made to try to attract more viewers. So it's obvious they're poking fun at it here, and also the trailer itself has that voiceover. It sounds exactly like those old trailers of the older Star Trek movies, with the same kind of voiceover, and so I personally get all these kinds of jokes, and so I do find it very funny and entertaining. And there's also a scene when they go to some planet which I guess just now decided to abandon the idea of money, so they're literally burning money in the streets and wearing shirts saying no money, and so it's kind of poking fun at that whole idea that was always in Star Trek, that they no longer use money. So I'm looking forward to see how they'll poke fun at all of that and make jokes out of all of that. So this is what I mean when you have to get what they're poking fun at to make it more entertaining. Maybe it will be funny anyway, but if you get what they're making parodies of, then that makes it better. And there are also some really interesting looking ideas as well, not just in terms of comedy. There's apparently an episode in which they meet another Cerritos from some alternate parallel universe in which things are different, and Boimler has a beard, of course, and Rappaport is more robotic than our Rappaport. So it kind of reminds me of the TNG episode Parallels, when we get to see other universes in which things are similar but different, so that's always fun to play with. And there's a scene when Tandy is transformed into an Andorian, apparently, because they're going to go on some undercover mission. And so there are a lot of shots which look actually interesting, not just in terms of jokes and parodies, but actually interesting science fiction ideas as well. And apparently this season is going to be the last season of Lower Decks, season 5, and so maybe they'll go out with a bang, they'll start doing epic stuff. So I am looking forward to it, because I did enjoy this show. Not everything, there are some things which are more annoying than funny. For example, I think Mariner is more annoying than she is funny. I get it that it's supposed to be funny, but to me she's more annoying than funny. And I also heard the rumor that apparently they're going to make a live action version of Mariner in some kind of new spin-off show. It's going to be a live action comedy about Federation outsiders serving on a resort planet, and we're going to see their day-to-day exploits that are being broadcast to the entire quadrant. So it sounds kind of like a reality show set on Ryza or something like that, so it just sounds kind of terrible. And Mariner is the worst character in my opinion from the show, because she is more annoying than funny. I did like that crossover episode they did with Pike's show when they showed up as live action versions of themselves. That was kind of interesting and funny, so I don't mind the idea of turning Lower Decks into live action, but why Mariner of all these other characters? Why her? Maybe they'll tone it down a little bit, maybe it will be watchable, but the whole idea of it just sounds kind of too ridiculous. Next, I want to review the new footage from the next season of the Pike Show, and the previous season ended on a cliffhanger when they're all about to die in a battle against the Gorn fleet, when the Gorn kidnapped parts of the crew, and they have no way to win, and there's a lot of high stakes, but apparently it's all fine. They all survived, no issues whatsoever, so that's a silly way to ruin all the tension, even though, it's a prequel show, so we know they all survived anyway, but it's still kind of strange how they jump ahead to some kind of a comedic episode. And so we immediately know that everything is going to be totally fine after that Gorn confrontation. And one good thing I was happy to see is that Uhura's hair became longer, because that's something I was saying should be done the closer the show gets to the time of TOS, to match her appearance in that show. And I remember I told you once how I was banned from some Star Trek Facebook group for mentioning that fact, for saying for continuity's sake her hair should gradually become more similar to how it looked like in the original series, and people called me out saying how dare I tell a black woman how she should make her hair look like, and I was actually banned for that, and now they're actually doing that in the show. So I was kind of glad to see that. And then they once again make that thing that they're changing their appearance using some kind of serum and not with surgery. So it makes you wonder how come they never did that in TNG and Deep Space Nine and the other shows, when they always said they have to get surgery to look like aliens, when apparently centuries ago they already had the serum that you can simply inject, and in seconds it makes you look like whatever alien you want to be. And I would have no problem if it was a combination of that, because presumably if you go undercover they might try to scan your DNA, so I will be okay with taking some genetic modifications temporarily, or maybe certain features of the body cannot be done with surgery alone, cannot be altered so easily. So if it was a combination of the two, maybe I can say it was always part of it, we just didn't get to see that whenever they changed into aliens in TNG and Deep Space Nine. Maybe they did undergo some genetic modifications as well, simply off screen. But here apparently it's enough to inject you with something and then it completely alters your body in seconds, and even your hair, because suddenly Pike's hair becomes even larger and Uhura suddenly has a different haircut than she had before, and all of them have slightly different haircuts suddenly. So how exactly did that happen? Simply by changing their genes. And maybe the most ridiculous thing is that when they are changed into Vulcans, they also start behaving like Vulcans. How exactly does that work simply because they changed their biology? I mean, they made the same mistake in the previous season when Spock became a human for one episode and started acting like a human teenager, completely forgetting all his Vulcan teachings and discipline, even though he didn't lose his memory. But I could come up with excuses saying maybe he lost some of his memory, maybe those parts of his brain with all that Vulcan discipline somehow got blocked away. So maybe I could come up with some explanations, but here it's even more ridiculous. Here there is no explanation we can come up with that will explain it. It simply makes absolutely no sense. It is absolutely illogical. How the hell would they suddenly all start behaving like the Vulcans, unless they're all simply taking the piece out of Spock? Maybe they're all simply making a parody, making an imitation of how they know Vulcans should act like. But they never said that. If there was some kind of clue to that they're simply deliberately pretending like a Vulcans, then I will be fine with that. You know, it's kind of like in that episode of Deep Space Nine when Sisko and his crew pretended to be Klingons because they went to some secret mission to expose Gowron as a changeling, and so they all had to pretend to be Klingons, not just physically, but Worf was actually training them on how they should talk and act like Klingons, and it was a really funny scene of how they artificially pretending to behave like Klingons. So if they simply did that here, then I'll have no problem with it. I would have loved it. I would have said this is really funny. If they are consciously, knowingly, deliberately acting like Vulcans because they know what Vulcans act like, and so it's kind of like a parody, then I'll have no problem with it. I will be totally fine. I will say this is a really funny scene. But that's not what they show us. They show us that because they are biologically transformed into Vulcans, that somehow automatically gives them all the teachings of Surak, and they automatically become logical and robotic and emotionless. How the hell does that work when it takes years for a Vulcan to practice all of that? How the hell can they gain that in seconds with a simple injection? Maybe that injection contains memories and teachings, but it makes no sense. It's just totally ridiculous and not in a good way. And as I just said, I'm totally okay with comedic stuff in Star Trek and parodies and all of that. I love that kind of stuff. And I myself was always saying, that Star Trek should be lighthearted and comedic. That's one of the reasons I like the Orville, for example. That's how Star Trek should be. But a good Star Trek show should also have some cleverness about it. It should have some kind of interesting story, some interesting science fiction ideas, and at least once in a while have some actual stakes and actual drama for some really good stories. And as long as it makes sense, I'll be totally okay with it. But here it makes absolutely no sense. Even Lower Decks makes a lot more sense than this. At least Lower Decks, which is a cartoon, which could have got away with a lot more silly stuff, it actually made a ton more sense because the writers of that show actually pay attention to the details and to the logic, and they do a lot of silly things, but it's in the realm of logic. You can still kind of believe it's happening. But here it's totally ridiculous, not in a good way. Because instead of being entertained by that, my brain is busy thinking, wait, nothing about it makes any sense at all. And so that's more annoying than it is funny. And apparently they go on some mission, and the joke is that they get the mission done so quickly because they're now so clever as Vulcans. So again, how does being biologically Vulcans makes you automatically know more science stuff somehow? And also they're all racist for Spock because Spock is only half Vulcan, and they constantly point it out. And again, if it was part of the joke that they're simply pretending to behave like other Vulcans, it's all a parody. They're simply making fun of the situation in a light-hearted way, then I'll totally love it. But no, apparently it's going to be that whole episode they're getting stuck as Vulcans. They're unable to revert back to humans, and they'll keep behaving that way for the whole episode. So they're not pretending to behave that way, they actually are that way. And so that is absolutely stupid. They've been kind of ruining the Vulcans for years now. In all the Star Trek shows, they're constantly showing Vulcans not acting like Vulcans, and now humans who pretend to be Vulcans suddenly become more Vulcans than real Vulcans. And so nothing about it makes any sense whatsoever, and it's really annoying. And so the fact that they chose this clip to show us, to tease us about the next season, so that means they must think it's the best scene from the next season. And so if that's really their best, then it really makes me worried about the next season. Because if it's that stupid for the whole show, then I will not be able to enjoy it. I don't care how funny it might be. If it's so stupid, it will be more offensive than funny to me. So now moving on to maybe the worst thing I ever saw in my life, and that is the trailer for the Section 31 movie, which was supposed to be a show as well, and thank God they canceled the show and just made a movie out of whatever crap they filmed. So at least it's going to be short and quick and be done with it. So that's the only comfort I have, and it looks absolutely awful in every way. And I talked a lot of times why Section 31 is such a bad idea. It's the absolute antithesis of everything Star Trek is supposed to be about, which is an optimistic future in which humanity has evolved and became better and more enlightened and all of that. And Section 31 is the absolute opposite of that. And the way they showed it in Deep Space Nine was that it was an independent rogue group which is simply doing some dirty work for the benefit of the Federation, but without any official connections with the Federation. Of course, maybe some officers in Starfleet are collaborating with them and so on, but it was always illegal what they're doing. They're doing it basically as a criminal organization outside of the Federation, even though they see themselves protecting the Federation. But they were always criminals and not any official part of the Federation. And the way that the new Star Trek shows completely misunderstood that and simply declared in all the new Star Trek shows, even in Picard and Discovery, that Section 31 is basically Starfleet intelligence. That they were always simply a division of Starfleet intelligence. That's what they kept insisting on, that they're directly working for Starfleet admirals and for the Federation, and that everyone knows about it. It's no longer a secret even, and so it's absolutely ridiculous. And they keep doubling down on that, and so I totally hate this whole idea, because it basically makes the Federation no different than the Romulans, for example, who were always trying to do that kind of sneaky things for the benefit of their empire. And so if the Federation is officially doing that, then what's the difference? Where is the utopia? Where is the high morality and all of that stuff? So it absolutely destroys the whole idea of the evolved humans with the better morality. And maybe this short movie can actually fix that continuity issue. If they actually say toward the end of this movie that Section 31 will now be banned, that they're now considered criminals by the Federation, that the Federation basically cuts all ties with it and is actually against them now, actively pursuing them, trying to eliminate them, trying to arrest them, that they're against them, then maybe it can fix the continuity message. Because In Deep Space Nine, no one ever heard about it until Sloan talked with Bashir and told him all about it. Maybe, I guess we can say Sloan was lying to him when he said they're a rogue group. Maybe it was simply a lie, and they were indeed an official part of Starfleet. But again, it ruins the whole idea of the optimistic, enlightened Federation. So what they should have done in this movie, which apparently, by the way, takes place in the time between TOS and TNG. And so if in the end of the movie maybe this group of Section 31 spies does something so horrible that the Federation decides to officially cancel Section 31 and then they become a real rogue group, a real independent organization, then maybe at least it can lessen how offensive the continuity mistake is. And apparently we're going to get a whole bunch of flashback scenes of the young Georgiou and how she became the Emperor of the Terran Empire. But what connection does that have with her current role inside Section 31? Like, what's the point of seeing flashbacks of how she used to be in the mirror universe? Like, what's the point of that exactly? I don't think it's necessary for the plot of Section 31 movie. And we have a whole bunch of scenes of her going to some kind of parties with a whole bunch of pretty costumes. And what is this, a James Bond movie set in the Star Trek universe? And just based on all the footage we see, you would never guess what time period it's set in the timeline of Star Trek. Like, there's absolutely no way to tell. They've made such a mess of everything in all the new Star Trek shows. The technology level seems to be jumping all over the place. You can no longer tell which time period it's set in just based on this footage. I only know where it's supposed to be because I read about it online. Apparently, a young Captain Rachel Garrett is going to be in there. That was the captain of the Enterprise C. So apparently, before she was the captain of the Enterprise C, she was also part of Section 31 for some reason. They have to shoehorn in something as a member berry, I guess. And also one of the guys on the team is apparently from that shape-shifting species we saw in Star Trek 6, that woman who was kind of like Mystique, and she had those strange eyes. And so one of the members of this team of Section 31 is going to be from the same species, which I guess is very useful for a spy organization to have a shapeshifter, even though even back in Discovery we saw that guy from Section 31 who recruited Georgiou in there. He had a holographic mask making him look like a different alien. So if they have holographic masks, then they can do that anyway. They can basically shapeshift using holograms anyway. But anyway, now we have that species of shapeshifters. I hope they mentioned somewhere that they're a really rare species, that they almost are extinct, that maybe other people killed them off, there are only a few of them left, and that will explain the continuity question of how come we saw so few of them throughout the Star Trek universe. And there's another guy who looks like a Borg, even though if it's set decades before TNG, then the Borg should not yet be known in the rest of the quadrant. So why the hell are we seeing a Borg who is liberated? Apparently he's doing whatever he wants to do, and so he looks like a Borg. Maybe they'll say it's not actually a Borg, but if you look closely, it looks almost exactly like a Borg. The tubes coming out and back in, his artificial eye, there's so much stuff about him that screams Borg. So maybe they'll say Section 31 actually knew about the Borg all along. Maybe since the time of Archer, since Archer met them and they simply classified their existence. It will kind of fit what we saw in Voyager. There was one episode when Seven's parents went off to study the Borg from before TNG, and so we can come up with excuses, but once again, it simply creates unnecessary continuity questions. So apparently Starfleet and the Federation knew all about the Borg from decades before, and they simply kept it a secret, and they actually recruited a former Borg drone into Section 31, and he was openly walking around with all this Borg gear on him, and so he was the first liberated Borg drone, and the Borg never knew about him. They kept saying how Hugh was the first liberated Borg drone, then it was Seven who was the first liberated Borg drone, and now apparently from decades before that there was another guy who was liberated from the Borg and then became a Section 31 agent and was openly walking around with all this Borg technology. So maybe it's simply similar, maybe it's not really a Borg, or maybe they'll say they found that technology somewhere, they don't know where it came from, and they simply used it to upgrade this guy to be a better agent, and they don't actually know anything about the Borg, they're simply using that technology. So I guess I can always come up with excuses to try to explain everything in a convoluted way, but again, it simply makes it annoying, because why didn't it simply set it after TNG Or why not set it during the Dominion War? Why not make this whole mission something to actually save the Federation from a really big threat, using dirty tactics to do it? You know, if there was some justifiable reason for doing necessary evil type of stuff for the bigger good, that would actually be interesting, because that will be an actual moral dilemma. You know, will you sacrifice one innocent person to save 10 innocent people? So that those kinds of questions are always interesting to think about and debate about. So if they actually had a clever story with that kind of element, then I would have enjoyed that. I would like it. But I'm betting we will not have any of that. We will not have any moral dilemmas whatsoever. We'll just have a bunch of cool looking scenes and action scenes of all these different strange characters just going off to shoot a bunch of people on some space station, and just silly stuff like that. Going to parties, and everyone will dress really nicely, because just a lot of shiny things on the screen as eye candy. That's all they can really do. And we also have a shot of Giorgio eating someone's eye. And that has Kurtzman written all over it, because in all the Kurtzman movies and shows he ever made, he always loves to show someone's eyes being tortured. He always does that, because he thinks it looks cool. Oh, it's really cool to rip someone's eye out, and so here she'll also eat it. So she's literally a cannibal. We also saw that in Discovery, when she was actually eating intelligent aliens as food. So she's a literal cannibal. She's also a space Hitler who killed trillions of people all over the galaxy, and yet she's somehow the hero now. I guess all those flashbacks are going to have some kind of tragic backstory to make us feel sorry for her and realize that she was only doing whatever she had to do to survive or something, and that way we can forgive her for being so evil. But when you have scenes of her enjoying eating people's eyes, literally enjoying it, being a cannibal, how the hell is that supposed to be the hero? If she was the villain of it, if she was the villain of the show, then that would be fine. A villain should be, monstrous. But if she's supposed to be the hero who has been redeemed somehow, why is she still enjoying killing people and eating their eyes and stuff like that? So it looks absolutely terrible, and I will have to watch it to make a review, since it's set in the universe of Star Trek. But thank God it's going to be one movie, hopefully, and not a whole show, because I don't know how I would have been able to watch a whole series of that. So hopefully it will just be one short, quick movie, and that's it. So that's all I have to say about it for today. Let me know what you think, and we can discuss it all in the comments below. And I will see you all next time. Bye bye.